Beneath the fractured moon, a single arrow's shadow etched the first scar on her soul. The wind howled like a forsaken wolf through the jagged peaks of the Silverfang Range, carrying the bite of eternal winter that clawed at Kira Miles's threadbare cloak. Snowflakes, sharp as shattered glass, stung her cheeks as she stumbled down the frozen path, her boots sinking into drifts that swallowed her ankles with merciless hunger. Exile was not a word. It was this, a slow unraveling, thread by thread, until nothing remained but the raw ache of abandonment. The matriarch's decree had been swift, her voice ablade in the great hall. You are no longer of the Frostvale pack. Begone, Omega, lest your weakness taint us all. No trial, no plea. Just the echo of jeers from those she had called kin, their eyes cold as the ice that now cradled her steps. Kira's breath came in ragged clouds, each exhale a fragile defiance against the storm. Her fingers, numb and blue-tinged, clutched the moonstone ring on a leather cord around her neck, the last remnant of her mother, who had whispered of hidden strengths under the same lunar gaze before fever claimed her. The stone, smooth and cool against her skin, pulsed faintly with an inner light, or so she imagined in her delirium. It was her anchor, a symbol of the old ways, when Omegas were not mere vessels, but bearers of the goddess's quiet fire. Now, it mocked her, a pretty lie against the truth of her rejection. She had failed the bonding rite, her spirit too wild, too unyielding to submit to the beta chosen for her. In a pack where hierarchy was law and weakness a death sentence, her refusal had branded her outcast. Banished at dawn, left to the mercy of the wilds, where predators prowled and the cold promised a numb end. The forest loomed ahead, a labyrinth of ancient pines bowed under snow's weight, their branches whispering secrets in the gale. Kira paused at the tree line, her body trembling not just from the frost, but from the hollow pit in her chest. What was strength if not enduring this isolation? The pack's fires had always warmed her from afar, but now they were ghosts, flickering memories of communal howls and shared feasts. She pressed on, the ring digging into her palm as she gripped it tighter, drawing a pinprick of blood that smeared the stone crimson. Blood and moon, eternal twins, her mother had said. One spilled in sacrifice, the other witnessing all. Hours blurred into a haze of white and shadow. The path narrowed, flanked by sheer cliffs that funneled the wind into a shrieking torrent. Kira's legs burned, her vision blurring with exhaustion, but she refused to yield. Stories of the wild Omegas lingered in her mind, those who wandered beyond the packs and returned as seers, their eyes holding the goddess's own fury. Was that her fate, or just a desperate fable to stave off despair? A distant uivo pierced the storm, low and mournful, sending a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. Wolves, or something older? The air thickened with the scent of pine resin and something metallic, blood, faint but unmistakable, carried on the breeze. She crested a ridge, the world opening to a vast basin where moonlight spilled like spilled silver over a frozen river. There, in the distance, flames danced erratically, a campfire perhaps, or the glow of ruin. Kira's heart stuttered. Safety or snare? In the packs, strangers were threats. Out here, they were lifelines or graves. Her instincts warred. The Omega in her yearned for warmth, for connection, while the survivor screamed to flee. But the cold was winning, sapping her will, and the ring's weight pulled her forward, as if the moon itself urged her on. As she descended, the wind shifted, bringing the acrid tang of smoke and charred wood. The fire was no hearth. It smoldered amid the wreckage of a camp, tents torn and strewn like discarded skins. Figures moved in the shadows, silhouettes against the blaze, their forms hulking and armored. Not wolves, but men, or something more. Kira froze, her pulse thundering in her ears. The moonstone warmed against her chest, an unnatural heat that bloomed like a secret flame. Whispers of the old lore surfaced. The goddess marked her chosen in moments of peril, revealing paths unseen. One figure detached from the group, taller than the rest, his cloak billowing like raven wings. Even from afar, his presence pressed against her senses, an alpha's aura, raw and commanding, laced with something broken. Guilt? Sorrow? He turned, as if sensing her, his gaze cutting through the night like a blade. Kira's breath caught. In that instant, the world narrowed to the glint of moonlight on his armor and the blood-streaked snow at his feet. Who was he, this shadowed king in exile's guise? And why did her blood sing in answer? She stepped back, but the snow betrayed her with a crunch. Heads snapped toward the sound. The alpha's voice rumbled across the basin, deep as thunder over ice. "Show yourself, wanderer. The night hides no friends here." Kira's hand flew to the moonstone, its glow hidden now beneath her fingers. Run or reveal. The choice hung heavy, a moral fork in the frozen path. Mercy or caution, which would redeem her or doom them both. The wind howled its indifference, and in the silence that followed, she felt the first thread of destiny weave tight. Kira's heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird, the moonstone ring burning hot against her palm, as if it fed on her fear. The shadows of the basin seemed to lean in. The fires crackle, a mocking whisper amid the wind's relentless dirge. She could flee into the tree line, vanish like a ghost in the snow, but the alpha's voice lingered, a command woven with weariness that tugged at something deep within her. A pull she couldn't name, instinctive as the tide to the moon. Curiosity warred with terror. In the packs, revelation meant submission or slaughter. Yet here, in the wild's indifferent embrace, what did she have left to lose? Slowly, she stepped forward, her boots crunching softly on the frost-laced ground. The figures by the fire turned as one, their eyes gleaming like embers in the night. Armored in steel, etched with runes that caught the moonlight in silvery veins, they were no mere wanderers, warriors. Their postures rigid with the discipline of a royal guard. Scars marred their faces, and the air around them hummed with the faint scent of blood and iron, fresh and metallic, mingling with the pine's sharp bite. At their center stood the Alpha, his form towering even in stillness, broad shoulders straining against a cloak stained dark at the edges. Blood, she realized, not mud. His hair, black as raven feathers, fell unkempt across a brow furrowed by shadows, and his eyes, storm gray and piercing, locked onto hers with an intensity that stole her breath. Who approaches in the dead of winter? His voice rolled out again, not harsh, but laced with a gravelly edge, as if each word cost him. Up close, the guilt she had sensed from afar etched deeper. Lines of sorrow around his mouth, a faint tremor in his clenched jaw. He was no common exile. The insignia on his vambrace, a crowned wolf's head, whispered of thrones and fallen crowns. King Aaron, her mind supplied unbidden, fragments of pack tales surfacing like ice flows. The Alpha King of the Ironclaw realm, whispered to be cursed by his own hand, haunted by a betrayal that had cost him his mate and half his kingdom. Ferido, amaldiçoado, wounded, cursed. The stories painted him as a tyrant, broken by remorse, fleeing assassins who sought to end his line. Kira swallowed, her throat dry as ash. "A wanderer," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt, though it carried the faint tremor of her Omega nature, soft, yielding, yet threaded with defiance. "No threat to you or yours." The lie tasted bitter. She was threat enough simply by existing, an outcast whose presence could invite misfortune. The warriors shifted, hands drifting to sword hilts, but Aaron raised a gauntleted hand, stilling them. His gaze roved over her, taking in the threadbare cloak, the snow-clumped hair, the way she stood unbowed despite the chill that must have seeped into her bones. Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or the ghost of pity. "Step into the light," he commanded, though softer now, almost an invitation. Kira hesitated, the moonstone pulsing like a second heartbeat, its glow hidden but insistent. Fear coiled in her gut, but so did a spark of curiosity, forbidden and alive. What drove a king to this forsaken wild? She moved closer, the fire's warmth a tentative caress against the cold that had numbed her soul. The flames danced low, fed by splintered wood from the ruined camp, casting elongated shadows that twisted like specters. Up close, the wreckage told a tale of ambush. Arrows embedded in the snow, a shield cleaved in two, the metallic tang of blood stronger here, soaking into the white blanket like spilled wine. Aaron's warriors formed a loose circle, their breaths visible in the frigid air, but their eyes held no immediate malice, only wariness born of endless flight. The king himself bore the marks of battle, a gash across his forearm, hastily bound with a strip of cloth that seeped crimson, and a deeper weariness in his stance, as if the weight of unseen crowns pressed him earthward. "You bear the scent of Frostvale," he said, tilting his head, inhaling subtly. Alphas always knew it was their curse and their gift. "Yet you walk alone. What exile brings an Omega to these passes?" The question hung like frost in the air, probing at her wounds. Kira's fingers tightened around the moonstone, drawing another bead of blood that trickled warm down her wrist, hidden beneath her sleeve. The connection stirred then, unbidden and electric, a thread of empathy snapping taut between them. She felt the echo of his guilt, a vast, churning sea beneath his regal facade, mirroring her own rejection's hollow ache. It was instinctive, this pull, the Omega in her recognizing the Alpha's fracture, yearning to mend what she herself could scarcely hold together. But she denied it, rationalizing it as survival's illusion. "The pack deemed me unfit," she said simply, meeting his gaze. "And you? What shadows chase a king into the storm?" Aaron's lips curved in a mirthless smile, the firelight hollowing his cheeks. "Shadows of my making." He glanced at the bloodied snow, his voice dropping to a murmur. "Betrayal festers like winter rot. I led my kin to ruin, and now the goddess exacts her toll." His eyes met hers again, and for a heartbeat the world stilled, the wind's howl fading, the fire's crackle a distant hum. In that gaze, Kira saw not command, but a man's quiet despair, the weight of choices that had scarred more than flesh. Her blood sang in response, the moonstone flaring with heat that spread through her veins, awakening something dormant, a curiosity laced with fear. Who was this broken sovereign, and why did her spirit lean toward him like a flower to the light? One of his warriors coughed, breaking the spell, a burly man with a beard frosted white. "Sire, we should move. The assassin's tracks grow cold, but so does the night." Aaron nodded, but his attention lingered on Kira, weighing her as if she were a riddle carved in ice. "Join us, if you will," he offered, the words reluctant yet sincere. "The wilds claim the solitary, but know this, my path is one of blood and retribution." Kira's mind raced, fear screaming trap, curiosity whispering alliance. The moonstone cooled against her skin, a silent counsel. In the packs, connection was chain. Here, it might be salvation. She nodded, the choice born of desperation, and that denied pull. As they broke camp, the wind carried a distant weevo, mournful and warning, and Aaron's gaze found hers once more, a spark of something unspoken igniting in the cold. The connection deepened, instinctive yet resisted, a fragile bridge over chasms of doubt. What mercy could an outcast offer a king haunted by his throne? The night pressed on, heavy with unspoken destinies, and the moon watched, silver and unyielding. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The snow-laden pines creaked like ancient bones under the moon's unblinking stare, their branches forming a cathedral of ice that sheltered the fleeing band. Kira followed in the wake of King Aaron's warriors, her steps muffled by the drifts, each one a reluctant surrender to the path she had chosen. The moonstone ring hung heavy against her chest, its subtle warmth a counterpoint to the biting wind that whipped through the narrow gorge, carrying the faint, acrid scent of pursuit, smoke from distant torches perhaps, or the musk of hounds loosed on a bloody trail. She had joined them not out of loyalty, but necessity. The wilds offered no mercy to the lone, and in Aaron's shadowed gaze, she glimpsed a mirror to her own fractures, a shared exile, though his was forged in the fires of a throne. They pressed onward through the night, the terrain rising into a labyrinth of crags where the wind's howl twisted into something primal, echoing the weavos that haunted the edges of her hearing. Aaron led with a quiet authority, his broad frame cutting through the storm like a blade, but Kira sensed the toll it exacted, the slight hitch in his gait, the way his gauntleted hand occasionally pressed against his side, as if staunching an invisible wound. His warriors, 5 in number, their armor dulled by frost and battle, flanked the group, eyes scanning the shadows with the vigilance of men who knew death's patient stride. No words passed among them save terse commands, the silence thick with the weight of unspoken losses. Kira kept to the rear, her breath shallow, rationalizing the instinctive pull that drew her closer to Aaron with every league. It was survival, nothing more. The Omega in her craved the pack's illusion, even if this one reeked of peril. As dawn's pale fingers clawed at the horizon, the gorge widened into a hidden cleft, a natural refuge carved by some ancient glacier's fury. Jagged walls of ice-sheathed rock rose on either side, their surfaces veined with frozen rivulets that gleamed like silver veins under the fading moonlight. A shallow cave yawned at the base, its mouth framed by boulders that offered scant concealment but promised temporary reprieve from the storm. Aaron signaled a halt, his voice a low rumble that cut through the gale. "Here, we hold until the light favors us." His eyes met Kira's briefly, a flicker of assessment in their storm-gray depths before he turned to direct his men. They kindled a small fire in the cave's depths, using tinder from their packs and the sparse, resinous wood scavenged from the cleft. The flames sputtered to life, casting a ruddy glow that danced across the walls, illuminating faded runes etched into the stone, symbols of the old goddess cults, circles and crescents invoking protection against the night's hungers. Kira sank against a boulder, the cold seeping through her cloak like accusatory fingers, but the fire's tentative warmth coaxed sensation back into her limbs. She watched Aaron as he stripped off his bloodied gauntlets, revealing forearms corded with muscle and marred by a fresh laceration that wept crimson onto the snow-dusted floor. The metallic tang mingled with the cave's damp earthiness, a visceral reminder of the ambush that had scattered them. One warrior, a grizzled veteran named Thorn, bandaged the wound with practiced efficiency, muttering curses under his breath. "Those curs from the Shadow Pack grow bold, sire, striking at your flank like cowards in the dark." Aaron's jaw tightened, his gaze distant, fixed on the flames as if they held the ghosts of his regrets. "Boldness, born of my failures. I should have foreseen the betrayal." His voice was a murmur, laced with that melancholic weight Kira had felt in the basin, a king's guilt, heavy as a crown of thorns. She shifted, the moonstone pulsing faintly against her skin, drawing her hand to it unbidden. Empathy stirred uninvited, a soft ache in her chest mirroring his. She knew rejection's sting, the way it hollowed the soul until only echoes remained. But she pushed it down, whispering to herself that pity was a luxury for the unbroken. Yet as their eyes met across the fire, the denial cracked, just a fraction. In his sorrow, she saw not the tyrant of legends, but a man adrift, his ethical core eroded by duty's relentless grind. The respite shattered with a distant howl, not wolf, but horn, sharp and signaling. Thorn scrambled to the cave's mouth, peering into the whitening gloom. Riders, closing fast. They must have picked up our trail in the gorge. Panic flickered in the warrior's eyes, but Aaron rose with predatory grace, his presence steadying them like an anchor in the storm. Defend the cleft, Kira. He turned to her, the command softening into something almost protective. Stay behind the boulders. This is no place for an Omega's mercy. She bristled at the term, rising to her feet despite the tremor in her legs. I'm no fragile thing to cower. If enemies come, my hands can wield a blade as well as yours. The words escaped before she could temper them, born of the wild spirit that had cost her the pack. Aaron's gaze sharpened, surprise yielding to a ghost of respect, and in that moment, the bond deepened, not through words, but the raw empathy of shared peril. He nodded, handing her a dagger from his belt, its hilt worn smooth by countless grasps. Then stand with us. The attackers burst into the cleft like shadows given fangs, 10 strong, cloaked in black furs and bearing the snarling bear emblem of the rival shadow pack, their bows drawn and eyes gleaming with fanatic zeal. Arrows whistled through the air, one grazing Thorn's shoulder and drawing a grunt of pain. Aaron roared, charging forward with his sword a silver arc in the dawn light, his warriors forming a wall of steel and fury. Blood sprayed the snow, red blooms against white, the clash of metal ringing like a dirge. Kira pressed against the rock, heart pounding, but when an assassin broke through, lunging toward Aaron's exposed back with a poisoned blade, instinct overrode fear. She surged forward, the moonstone flaring hot, as if ignited by the goddess's own breath, and drove the dagger into the attacker's side. He crumpled, gurgling, his blood warm and slick on her hands. Aaron whirled, dispatching another foe with a savage swing, his eyes locking on hers amid the chaos. Gratitude flashed there, mingled with something deeper, a recognition of her fire, the quiet strength the packs had deemed weakness. As the last assassin fell, the cleft fell silent, save for ragged breaths and the drip of melting snow. Aaron approached, wiping blood from his blade, his chest heaving. "You saved my flank," he said softly, the words carrying the weight of a vow. Kira met his gaze, the metallic taste of violence on her tongue, the moonstone's heat fading to a steady thrum. Empathy bloomed into bond then, tentative and resisted, a thread of trust woven in the aftermath's quiet. What was redemption, if not choosing to shield the broken when the world demanded flight? The cave's runes seemed to glow faintly, as if the moon approved, but doubt lingered in her heart, a spiritual fork where alliance might heal or ensnare. The wind sighed outside, carrying the promise of more shadows, and in Aaron's lingering touch as he steadied her, Kira felt the first stirrings of a destiny neither could deny. The cave's runes pulsed like veins of captured moonlight as the last echoes of battle faded, leaving only the ragged symphony of breaths and the drip of blood melting into stone. Kira knelt in the snow-dusted floor, her hands slick with the assassin's life essence, the dagger slipping from her numb fingers to clatter against the rock. The metallic tang clung to her skin, mingling with the cave's damp chill, a visceral shroud that pressed against her chest like an unspoken accusation. She had struck true, shielding Aaron from the blade's poisoned kiss, but the act stirred something deeper than survival, a tremor in her core, as if the moonstone ring had drunk the violence and now churned with forbidden secrets. Her body ached, not from the fight's exertion, but from the echo of empathy that bound her to the fallen, their final gasps whispering through her veins like wind through hollow reeds. Aaron stood over her, his sword sheathed, but his presence a storm held in check, the firelight carving shadows across his face that deepened the hollows of his guilt. He extended a hand, calloused and scarred, to help her rise, and when their fingers met, a spark leaped, not of flesh, but of something ancient, electric. The moonstone flared beneath her cloak, hot as a brand, its glow seeping through the leather cord to illuminate the space between them in a soft, ethereal silver. Kira gasped, pulling back, but the warmth spread, uncoiling through her limbs like liquid moonlight, awakening senses she had long buried under layers of rejection and frost. The world sharpened. The warrior's heartbeats thrummed in her ears, distinct as drumbeats in a ritual chant. The runes on the walls whispered in a tongue older than the Pack's, fragments of prophecy curling like smoke. The Pathfinder's light pierces the king's shadow, blood for blood, moon for throne. "What sorcery is this?" Thorn muttered, his bandaged shoulder forgotten as he stared at the glow, crossing himself with a warrior's wary sign against the unseen. The other guards edged closer, their steel glinting in the dual light of fire and stone, suspicion etching their faces like fresh scars. But Aaron did not retreat. His gray eyes widened, not in fear, but in dawning recognition, as if the goddess herself had etched her will upon the air. He knelt before her, his voice a low rumble that cut through the tension like a blade through silk. "The ring. It bears the mark of the lunar seers. Your mother's, you said, an Omega's heirloom, passed in whispers of hidden bloodlines." Kira's breath caught, the empathy surging now into revelation, unbidden and overwhelming. She clutched the moonstone, its surface slick with her earlier blood, and in that instant, the cave dissolved. Visions cascaded through her mind's eye, fractured as ice under a hammer, yet vivid with the moon's unforgiving clarity. She saw Aaron not as the broken king before her, but enthroned in a hall of iron and frost, his crown a circlet of thorns woven with wolf's fangs. Betrayal flickered. A rival alpha, face shrouded in shadow, whispering poison into the ears of courtiers, his hand guiding the arrow that felled Aaron's true mate years ago. Guilt crashed over her like an avalanche, Aaron's own, a sea of remorse for choices that had shattered alliances and spilled kin's blood in futile wars. But deeper still, the vision twisted to her. A Pathfinder's gift, dormant in Omega lines deemed weak by pack law. She glimpsed threads of destiny, silver paths weaving through the wilds, one leading to a throne reclaimed, another to ruin. And at the crux, her own form, leaping before an assassin's shaft, the arrow piercing her chest under a blood moon, her lips forming his name in a final trembling breath. The cave snapped back into focus, the moonstone's glow dimming to a faint pulse, leaving Kira trembling, sweat beading on her brow despite the cold. She met Aaron's gaze, the weight of what she had seen pressing like a moral yoke, knowledge that bound her to his fate, demanding a choice between her fragile freedom and the redemption he carried like a curse. I saw," she whispered, her voice raw, threaded with the tragedy of truths too vast for one soul. "Your past. The betrayal that haunts you. The Shadowpack's alpha. He wove the lies that cost you everything. But there's more. A curse upon your bloodline, sealed by the goddess for the wars you waged in pride's name. Only a Pathfinder's light can unravel it, guiding you through shadows to reclaim what was lost." Aaron's face paled, the fire's warmth no match for the chill of confirmation. He rose slowly, his hand lingering near hers, the air between them thick with the scent of blood and pine, the wind outside moaning like a dirge for unspoken fates. The old prophecies spoke of an Omega unmarked by pack bonds, bearer of the moon's eye, who would reveal the true path. His voice cracked, melancholic and edged with awe, the ethical king surfacing through layers of despair. "You are she, Kira Miles, exiled not by weakness, but by design, the goddess's hand, stripping away the chains to forge her instrument. He glanced at his warriors, who murmured in hushed reverence, the runes now seeming to hum in approval, their silver lines tracing patterns of crescent moons and winding trails. Yet doubt coiled in Kira's heart, a spiritual serpent amid the revelation's fire. The vision's end lingered, her sacrifice, the arrow's bite, a love confessed in death's whisper. Was this gift a blessing or a shroud? The Pax had rejected her for her wild spirit, deeming it unfit. Now it bound her to a king's redemption, demanding she yield her life for his. Empathy warred with resistance, the pull toward him instinctive, rationalized as duty, but resisted as a thief of her hard-won solitude. Aaron stepped closer, his presence a gravitational force, the guilt in his eyes softening to something tender, born of the pain they now shared. "This changes everything," he said, his breath warm against the cave's chill. "You are the key to my destiny, the light that pierces my endless night. But the path, it will demand blood. Yours, perhaps. Mine, without question." Kira rose, the moonstone cool now against her skin, a symbol of burdens embraced and feared. The warriors watched, the fire crackling like laughter from the gods, casting their faces in gold and shadow. Outside, the wind carried distant huevos, a chorus to the unfolding tragedy. What was strength, if not choosing to illuminate the broken path, even when it led to one's own eclipse? The revelation hung between them, a bridge of moonlight over chasms of choice, and in Aaron's gaze, Kira saw the first flicker of hope, a king's soul stirring from guilt's grave. But the vision's whisper echoed, her name on dying lips, a love that redeemed through loss. The cave's silence deepened, heavy with the moral weight of destinies entwined, and the moon, peering through a crack in the stone, bore witness to the Omega's awakening fire. Comment, Luna, if you'd walk through the storm for someone who saw your worth. The wind clawed at the cave's mouth like a vengeful spirit, hurling snowflakes that glittered like shattered oaths into the dim interior. Kira stood apart from the fire's faltering glow, the moonstone ring a cold weight against her chest, its silver pulse now a mocking echo of the visions that had unraveled her fragile solitude. The revelation clung to her like frost on bare skin, truths too heavy for an Omega's shoulders, binding her to Aaron's shadowed throne with threads of prophecy and blood. She had glimpsed the curse's roots, wars ignited by his pride, alliances fractured by betrayal, the rival alpha of the Shadow Pack weaving lies that poisoned the Ironclaw court like venom in a chalice. And at the heart of it, her own form, arrow-pierced, whispering his name as life ebbed. Freedom or fate? The choice gnawed at her, a moral blade twisting in the wound of her exile. Aaron paced the cave's confines, his boots grinding against the rune-etched stone. Each step a measured thunder that mirrored the storm in his eyes. His warriors huddled near the flames, sharpening blades with rhythmic scrapes that filled the silence like accusations. Thorn's gaze flicked to Kira often, reverence warring with doubt in his scarred features, but none spoke the questions burning in the air. The king's guilt hung thicker now, palpable as the metallic tang of drying blood, his ethical core fracturing under the weight of what she had unveiled. "The Shadow Pack's alpha, Vortigern," he said at last, his voice a low rumble that cut through the wind's dirge. "He was my brother in arms once, sworn under the moon's vow. I trusted him with the realm's spine, and he repaid it with treachery, slaying my mate in the dead of night to shatter my line." His hand clenched, knuckles whitening, the firelight carving deep lines of remorse across his face. "The goddess cursed me then, marking my blood with endless pursuit, but your sight shows a path to end it, to confront him, not in blind war, but with the light that redeems." Kira's breath caught, the cave's chill seeping into her bones despite the fire's tentative warmth. Empathy surged unbidden, a tide pulling her toward his sorrow, but she resisted, rationalizing it as the Omega's curse, the instinctive mend of fractures that only deepened her own. The Pax had cast her out for such wildness, deeming it rebellion. Now it demanded she choose between her hard-won isolation and entanglement in a king's redemption. Confrontation means returning to the heart of it all, she murmured, her voice steady despite the tremor in her core. Your court, the matriarchs who branded me unfit. They whisper of you as the fallen tyrant Aaron. What mercy can I offer when my own blood turned cold against me? The moonstone warmed faintly, as if urging her forward, its glow casting prismatic shadows that danced like elusive truths on the walls. Dawn broke with a merciless clarity, the sky a bruised expanse of gray that bled into the snowfields beyond the cleft. They broke from the cave at Aaron's command, the warriors forming a steel phalanx around Kira, their steps crunching through the drifts toward the lower valleys where the Ironclaw strongholds loomed. The journey wound through frozen ravines, the wind carrying distant weavos that twisted into warnings. Shadowpack scouts, perhaps, or the ghosts of betrayals past. Kira's mind churned with the vision's fragments. Vortigern's shadowed face, leering from a throne of bones. The Frostvale matriarch, her own exile's architect, allying with the traitor for power's sake. Freedom tempted her still, a solitary path vanishing into the wilds, unyoked from destinies that reeked of sacrifice. Yet the bond with Aaron deepened with every shared glance, resisted as a siren's call, rationalized as duty to the goddess's weave. By midday, the terrain flattened into a vast, snow-swept plain. The silhouette of Blackthorn Citadel, rising like a jagged crown against the horizon, its towers of ice-veined stone piercing the clouds, banners of the Ironclaw limp in the still air. But the approach was no triumphant return. Shadows stirred on the flanks, dark figures on horseback emerging from the tree line like specters summoned by the moon's memory. Vortigern's vanguard, 20 strong, their furs emblazoned with the snarling bear, bows nocked and eyes gleaming with predatory zeal. At their head rode the rival Alpha himself, his form hulking atop a midnight steed, armor chased with silver that caught the weak sun like false moonlight. His face, once handsome, was now twisted by ambition's scar, a jagged line across his cheek from some forgotten skirmish. His laugh a bark that echoed across the plain. Aaron, the Ghost King returns. Vortigern's voice boomed, laced with mockery that masked the venom of old grudges. Crawling back with your ragtag shades and an Omega stray? The goddess mocks you still. His gaze raked over Kira, dismissive, but faltered when the moonstone's subtle glow pierced her cloak, a silver beacon in the white waste. Aaron halted the group, his sword drawn in a fluid arc, the steel singing as it met the air. Your lies end here, brother, he growled, his tone ethical steel tempered by melancholy, the guilt in his eyes hardening to resolve. The Pathfinder reveals your web, alliances forged in blood, the matriarchs bought with promises of my throne. Face me, not in shadow, but under the open sky. The confrontation erupted without mercy, hooves thundering as the Shadowpack charged, arrows whistling like vengeful winds. Aaron's warriors met them in a clash of iron and fury, blades biting flesh amid sprays of crimson that stained the snow like accusations from the earth. Kira pressed close to Aaron, the moonstone flaring hot as peril closed in, her vision sharpening the chaos. Paths of escape weaving through the melee, one leading to Vortigern's throat, another to the Frostvale envoys lurking at the Citadel's gates. A rider broke through, bearing down on her with a lance tipped in poisoned barbs, but she dodged, the ring's guidance instinctive now, her dagger flashing to sever the reins. Blood arced, warm and sticky, splattering her face as the horse reared. Vortigern wheeled toward them, his blade a crimson-streaked blur, locking eyes with Aaron in a duel that shook the plain. You cling to mercy like a whelp, he snarled, parrying a savage blow that sent sparks flying. War crowns the strong. Forgiveness is for the weak. Aaron fought with restrained power, each strike a judgment on his past, but his gaze sought Kira amid the fray, the bond a lifeline in the storm. She saw the matriarch then, her former pack leader, emerging from the citadel's shadow with a cadre of Frostvale betas, their faces etched with the same cold judgment that had exiled her. "Kira Miles, the Wild One returns," the matriarch called, her voice a silken blade. "Join us, prove your worth, or perish with the fallen king." The choice crystallized in that blood-soaked instant, a moral crucible under the indifferent sun. Freedom beckoned in the matriarch's offer, reintegration, a place in the hierarchy, unburdened by prophecy's chains. Or love, resisted yet blooming in Aaron's fierce protection, demanding forgiveness for his wars, war against the traitor to redeem them both. The moonstone burned, visions overlapping. Her arrow-wound future if she chose him, liberty's hollow echo if she turned away. Empathy overwhelmed resistance. In Aaron's struggle, she saw not tyranny, but a soul seeking absolution through compassion's fire. "No," she whispered to the wind, then louder, stepping forward as an arrow loosed from the shadows arced toward Aaron's back. Her body moved of its own accord, the Pathfinder's light guiding her leap, but doubt lingered, a spiritual tear where sacrifice might heal the realm or shatter her utterly. Vortigern's laugh died as Kira's presence disrupted his charge, the moonstone's glow illuminating the traitor's pallor. The battle teetered, Weavos rising from the citadel as loyalties fractured, the air thick with the scent of sweat, blood, and thawing snow. Aaron dispatched a foe, turning to her with eyes wide in the fray's heart, the weight of their entwined fates pressing like the gathering clouds. What was redemption, if not forgiving the broken to wage war on the betrayer, choosing love's perilous freedom over isolation's cage? The plain echoed with clashes and cries, a tragedy unfolding under the moon's distant watch, and in that moral forge, Kira's spirit hardened, the ring's pulse a vow against the encroaching dark. The snow churned into a maelstrom of white and red beneath the bruised sky, each flake a fleeting witness to the unraveling of oaths long buried in frost. Kira's leap carried her through the fray like a shadow unbound, the moonstone ring searing her skin as if the goddess herself gripped her heart, propelling her toward the arrow's lethal arc. Time fractured in that suspended breath, the whistle of fletched death slicing the air, Aaron's back exposed amid the clash of steel, Vortigern's triumphant snarl twisting into shock as she intercepted the shaft. It struck not with the finality of visions past, but a glancing fury, embedding in her shoulder with a wet thud that tore a gasp from her lips. Pain bloomed, hot and unrelenting, blood welling dark against the pale fabric of her cloak, soaking through to mingle with the metallic reek of the plain's carnage. She staggered, the world tilting in a haze of crimson and gray, but did not fall. Aaron whirled at the impact, his sword mid-swing, his face draining to ashen horror as he caught her arm, steadying her against the press of his armored chest. "Kira? No!" His voice cracked, raw with the guilt that had shadowed him since the basin, now a thunderous wave crashing over them both. The bond surged, no longer resisted but a visceral tether, her empathy flooding with his despair, the ethical king, once armored in duty, now fracturing at the sight of her wound. Around them, the battle raged on, warriors clashing in a symphony of grunts and ringing metal, the snow trampled to bloody slush under hooves and boots. Thorn felled a shadow pack rider with a brutal axe blow, his roar a defiant echo while the Frostvale betas hesitated at the plain's edge, their matriarch's eyes narrowing on Kira's form, calculating the shift in the weave of power. Vortigern reined in his steed, the beast snorting steam into the chill, his blade dripping scarlet as he circled closer, the bear emblem on his fur a grotesque stain against the white. "The stray Omega plays hero," he mocked, though his voice held an undercurrent of unease, the moonstone's glow piercing the gloom like an accusatory eye. "Fitting end for a king's folly. She bleeds for you, Aaron. Will you kneel now or drag her into your grave?" The traitor Alpha's words were poison, stirring the ghosts of betrayals. The night he had slain Aaron's mate, the whispers that had turned the matriarchs against the Ironclaw throne, forging secret pacts in shadowed halls for a realm remade in his image. Kira felt it all through the ring's pulse, visions flickering at the edges of her pain. Alliances crumbling like ice under spring's thaw, the matriarch's hand in her own exile, a calculated severing to feed Vortigern's ambition. Aaron's grip tightened, his free hand pressing against her wound, the warmth of his palm a stark contrast to the cold leaching from her limbs. Blood seeped between his fingers, slick and accusing, the scent thick in her nostrils, mingling with the pine-sharp wind that howled across the plain like the goddess's lament. "Hold on," he murmured, his breath ragged against her ear, the melancholy in his tone laced with a fierce protectiveness that unraveled her resistances. She had rationalized this pull as duty, as the Pathfinder's curse. But here, in the heart of judgment, it bloomed into something deeper, a love forged in shared fractures, resisted no longer but embraced as the only truth amid the lies. Yet freedom whispered still, a spectral choice. Slip from his grasp, flee to the wilds where no throne or prophecy could claim her, leaving the packs to their wars. The matriarch advanced then, her betas fanning out like wolves, scenting weakness, her face a mask of regal disdain etched by years of hierarchical iron. Snow dusted her silvered hair, and her eyes, cold as the citadel's depths, fixed on Kira with the same judgment that had banished her. "Child of Frostvale, you wander no more," she called, her voice carrying over the din like a ritual incantation. "Return to us. Prove your wild blood serves the greater pack, not this cursed king's delusions. Forgiveness awaits those who choose order over chaos." The offer hung, a silken snare. Reintegration, a place unyoked from sacrifice, where her gift could be bent to the matriarch's will, far from the arrow's fatal promise. The moonstone throbbed, visions clarifying. The matriarch's pact with Vortigern, sealed in a temple under false moons, trading Kira's exile for influence over the Ironclaw ruins. Kira's vision blurred, pain lancing through her like lightning over peaks, but she straightened against Aaron, drawing strength from the steady thrum of his heartbeat against her side. The warriors faltered in their advance, sensing the moral crux unfolding. The air heavy with the scent of blood and thawing earth, weavos rising from the citadel's walls as loyalties teetered. Vortigern laughed, spurring forward to exploit the hesitation, his blade aimed at Aaron's throat, but Kira's voice cut through, soft yet unyielding, a thread of compassion woven into the storm. "No more lies," she said, the words spilling like blood from her lips, directed at the matriarch. "You cast me out to feed your ambitions, allying with the betrayer who poisoned a realm for power. But strength is not in chains or thrones. It's in choosing mercy over vengeance, even when it scars." Aaron moved then, surging forward with Kira at his side, his sword a silver blur that parried Vortigern's strike, the clash reverberating like thunder in the bones. "She speaks truth," he roared, his voice a king's decree tempered by redemption's fire, guilt transmuting to resolve. "Your web unravels, brother. The goddess demands not war's crown, but the light of forgiveness to heal what pride broke." The duel intensified, blades singing in deadly harmony, snow spraying in arcs that caught the weak sun like fleeting stars. Kira pressed the fray's edge, her uninjured hand clutching the moonstone, guiding paths unseen. A feint here, a dodge there, her visions illuminating escapes for Aaron's men while closing Vortigern's flanks. The matriarch's betas wavered, one stepping forward as if to aid, but Kira's gaze met hers, A silent judgment, the Omega's fire no longer hidden, but blazing. Choose, she whispered to the air, the word a spiritual invocation, love or liberty, forgiveness or endless war. The ring's glow intensified, casting silver veins across the bloodied snow, a symbol of the Renascimento teetering on this blade's edge. Vortigern stumbled, a gash opening across his arm from Aeron's precise strike, his snarl twisting to fury as the tide turned. The Shadowpack riders broke, scattering into the tree line like shadows fleeing dawn, their howls fading into the wind's mournful chorus. The matriarch retreated, her face crumpling in the revelation's glare, the ethical fracture of her choices laid bare. But victory tasted of ash in Kira's mouth, the arrow's wound pulsing with each heartbeat, a harbinger of the greater sacrifice looming in her visions. Aeron turned to her, sheathing his blade, his hands framing her face, thumbs brushing away blood-flecked snow from her cheeks. "You chose me," he said, voice thick with awe and sorrow, the bond now a flame that warmed the encroaching cold. "In the heart of judgment, you forged our path." Yet doubt lingered, a spiritual thorn amid the triumph. The arrow she had glimpsed was not this glancing blow, but one yet to come, demanding true blood under the moon's full gaze. Freedom's echo faded, replaced by the weight of love as redemption's proof, not prize. The plain fell quiet, save for the wind's sigh and distant weavos, the citadel's towers looming like silent judges. What was destiny, if not the moral forge where compassion tempered war's blade, even as it promised loss? Kira leaned into Aeron's hold, the moonstone's pulse syncing with his, a vow etched in blood and starlight as the clouds gathered for the night's inevitable trial. The clouds parted like a shroud, rent by divine fury, unveiling the full moon's merciless orb that bathed the bloodied plain in silver venom. Kira's world narrowed to the throb in her shoulder, where the arrow's barbed kiss lingered like a lover's betrayal, each pulse a reminder of the greater wound yet to come. Aeron's arms encircled her, unyielding as ironroot in storm-tossed earth, his breath a ragged hymn against her temple, warm with the scent of sweat and iron-laced resolve. The bond thrummed between them now, no longer a resisted whisper, but a roaring current, flooding her veins with his guilt transmuted to fierce devotion, the ethical king, once adrift in melancholy's sea, anchoring himself to her fragile form. Yet freedom's ghost clawed at her edges, a spectral temptation. Slip away into the wild's embrace, leave the throne's shadows to devour him alone, unburdened by prophecy's sacrificial demand. The citadel loomed closer as they advanced, its towers clawing at the night sky like frozen sentinels, their ice-veined stone reflecting the moon's glow in fractured prisms. Distant weavos swelled from the walls, a chorus of fractured loyalties, some in fealty to Aeron's return, others in echo of Vortigern's fleeing horde. The matriarch's betas had scattered like ash on the wind, their retreat a silent confession of webs unraveled, but the air hummed with unresolved peril, thick with the metallic tang of spilled blood and the pine-sharp bite of encroaching frost. Kira leaned into Aeron's side, her steps faltering, the moonstone ring pulsing hot against her chest, its silver light seeping through her cloak like blood from a hidden vein. Visions flickered at the periphery, the arrow's true path, not glancing, but fatal, piercing heart-deep under this very moon, her lips shaping his name as darkness claimed her. They breached the citadel's outer gates at twilight's death throes, the iron portcullis grinding open on rusted protests, revealing courtyards strewn with the detritus of siege, shattered shields, trampled banners, furled like fallen wings. Torches flared along the battlements, their flames guttering in the wind, casting elongated shadows that danced like specters of the betrayed. Aeron's warriors fanned out, Thorn barking orders to secure the perimeter, but the king's focus remained on her, his gray eyes storm-dark with unspoken vows. "Rest now," he murmured, guiding her toward the inner keep, his hand a steady pressure on her uninjured arm, the warmth seeping through her like fire to frost. The healers will mend what the shadows tore. But Kira knew the mend was illusion. The ring's thrum whispered of deeper cuts, a choice crystallized in blood's currency. Within the great hall, the air hung heavy with the scent of aged stone and dying embers from a hearth that crackled feebly against the encroaching cold. Tapestries of lunar hunts, wolves pursuing stags under crescent moons, adorned the walls, their threads frayed by years of neglect, symbols of a realm teetering on ruin. Aaron eased her onto a fur-draped bench, summoning a healer whose hands trembled as they unbound the wound, the arrow's barb emerging with a slick tear that drew fresh crimson rivulets. Pain lanced through Kira, sharp as winter's fang, but she bit back the cry, her gaze locking on Aaron's as he knelt before her, his face etched with the melancholy of one who had lost too much to fate's caprice. "You chose compassion over vengeance," he said, his voice a low timbre that resonated in her bones, laced with the tragedy of what her visions foretold. "In the plains forge, you illuminated my path. But the goddess demands more, a union forged in sacrifice, not ease." The moonstone flared then, unbidden, its glow illuminating the hall in ethereal silver, drawing gasps from the gathered guards and servants who emerged from the shadows like moths to flame. The visions cascaded anew, vivid as blood on snow. Vortigern's final gambit, assassins slipping through the citadel's undercroft, their blades anointed in shadow pack venom. The arrow, fletched with raven feathers, arcing from the rafters toward Aaron's throne, her body intercepting in a leap of instinctive love. Blood pooling, warm and final, her whisper, "Aaron," a confession on dying breath, the key to unraveling his curse through her willing end. Freedom warred one last time, a desperate surge. Renounce the bond. Flee to the peaks where no king or pack could bind her, letting destiny claim him without her light. But the pull was absolute now, rationalized no longer, accepted as the Omega's truth. Love as redemption's proof, a moral pinnacle where compassion eclipsed self. Night deepened, the wind's howl infiltrating the hall like a harbinger's wail, extinguishing torches one by one until only moonlight filtered through arrow-slit windows, painting their forms in ghostly luminescence. Aaron rose, drawing her with him toward the throne dais, a seat of ancient oak carved with wolf motifs, its arms scarred by generations of claws. "The confrontation ends here," he declared, his presence a gravitational force that steadied the quaking in her soul. "Vortigern will come, drawn by the ring's call, seeking to sever the thread before it weaves anew." His hand cupped her cheek, thumb tracing the line of her jaw, the touch tender amid the tragedy, igniting a spark that chased the cold from her veins. The bond sealed in that gaze, resisted instincts yielding to union's fire, her wild spirit finding harbor in his ethical depths. Footsteps echoed from the undercroft then, stealthy as serpents in snow, and shadows coalesced into forms. 3 assassins, cloaked in black, their eyes gleaming with fanatic gleam, bows drawn taut. Vortigern lingered at the threshold, his hulking frame silhouetted against the moonlit arch, a smirk twisting his scarred lip. "The Pathfinder's light blinds you both," he sneered, his voice a venomous drawl that stirred the hall's drafts. "One arrow to end the line, and the realm bends to true strength." The lead assassin loosed, the shaft whistling deathward toward Aaron's heart. Kira moved without thought, the moonstone's blaze guiding her leap, a renascimento born of choice, sacrifice as the ultimate mercy. The arrow struck true, burying deep in her chest with a bloom of agony that shattered breath and bone, blood surging hot and metallic to stain her lips. She crumpled into Aaron's arms, the world dissolving to the silver of his eyes, the wind's mournful weavo fading to silence. "Aaron," she whispered, her voice a trembling thread, filled with the love confessed at last, unresisted and pure. Darkness edged her vision, the ring's pulse syncing with his frantic heartbeat, visions resolving. Her blood, spilled in union, unraveling the curse, his vow a thunder in the ether, to tear kingdoms asunder, pull her from death's grasp through trials of fire and moon. Aaron's roar shattered the hall, a primal grief that felled the assassins in a whirlwind of blade and fury, Vortigern's form crumpling under the onslaught, his empire of lies dissolving in crimson finality. He cradled her, tears carving paths through blood-streaked cheeks, the moonstone's glow enveloping them in a cocoon of silver light. "Not you," he vowed, voice breaking on the edge of despair, the ethical king reborn in her sacrifice's forge. "I will rend the veil, summon the goddess's mercy. Your light redeems me, live, Kira, and claim the throne at my side." Pain ebbed to ethereal warmth, her spirit hovering on Renacimiento's cusp, the bond a bridge over death's chasm. Blood and moon entwined, symbols of healing's dawn as the citadel's weavo swelled in triumphant echo. What was love, if not this, sacrifice yielding to union's eternal flame, rejection transmuted to destiny's crown? The hall fell still, save for the fire's rebirth in the hearth, flames leaping high as if fed by their shared essence. Kira's breath steadied, faint but persistent, the arrow's venom purged by the ring's lunar grace, her wound knitting in threads of silver light. Aaron held her through the night, the wind sighing benediction, their union a redemptive pyre against the dark. In that embrace, the Omega's fire healed the king's wound, proving love's truth, not reward, but the soul's profound rebirth. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.